Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Sam Morton thought he'd found paradise, a peaceful lakeside retreat, far from the chaos of city life. But when his dream collided with the overreach of a powerful homeowners association, his sanctuary became a battleground. What started as a simple dock project turned into a fight for freedom and justice. Sam Morton, a former Navy veteran, had spent years longing for a serene and solitary life after years of service. His dream finally materialized when he purchased a picturesque 3-acre plot on the shores of Lake Clarkville, nestled in the heart of Maine. The land, with its 150 feet of pristine shoreline, was a jewel, a place where he could leave behind the noise and chaos of the world and focus on the simpler pleasures of life. Fishing at dawn, building a dock to moor his modest boat, and creating a cozy retreat for himself. The property itself had a storied past, having been in the hands of a single family since the 1930s. This rich history made it a rare gem among the newer cookie-cutter subdivisions that dotted the surrounding area. Sam's thoroughness showed in every step of his purchase process. He pored over title deeds, commissioned surveys, and sought every legal assurance that his new slice of heaven was free from encumbrances. This was his land, his sanctuary, and his legacy. Adjacent to Sam's haven lay the sprawling community of Lakeview Heights. Governed by a homeowners association, HOA, the neighborhood was known for its beautifully manicured lawns, identical homes, and, most infamously, its strict and sometimes overbearing HOA rules. Sam's property, though bordering Lakeview Heights, had never been part of their jurisdiction. Its independent status was well documented, but the proximity would soon prove to be a double-edged sword. Sam's life by the lake began blissfully. Mornings were spent tending to the property, planting saplings, and enjoying the sound of the water lapping against the shore. He relished the solitude, finding solace in the quiet moments with only nature as his companion. The evenings were filled with the soothing ritual of watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the lake in hues of amber and crimson. This idyllic existence was disrupted one cool spring morning when Sam decided to bring his vision for the property to life. With the proper county permits in hand, he embarked on constructing a modest dock and boathouse. To Sam, the project was another step in claiming his sanctuary and tailoring it to his needs. The first posts were driven into the lakebed, the framework of his dock taking shape. He envisioned summers spent fishing off its edge and cozy evenings reading in the boathouse. Unbeknownst to Sam, however, his project was being noticed. It wasn't long before the whispers began in Lakeview Heights. The HOA, led by its president Mark Henderson and compliance officer Linda Carter, began to take an unwelcome interest in Sam's activities. To them, his construction represented not just an affront to their carefully controlled aesthetic, but a challenge to their perceived authority. Sam was unaware of the storm brewing across his property line. For him, the shoreline represented freedom, unshackled by suburban regulations. But for the HOA, his dock was an anomaly, a breach of their meticulously upheld rules, even if they technically held no jurisdiction over his land. The peace Sam had fought so hard to achieve was about to be shattered, and while he had spent his career defending his country, he was unprepared for the battle that awaited him in his own backyard. The sun was high in the sky as Sam hammered the last nails into the framework of his dock. With each stroke, his vision of an idyllic lakeside retreat drew closer to completion. The rhythmic sound of the hammer echoed over the water, blending with the calls of distant loons. Lost in the satisfaction of progress, Sam didn't notice the approach of two figures walking briskly across his property. Their purposeful strides and determined expressions hinted at the confrontation to come. "Excuse me!" The sharp tone cut through the stillness, causing Sam to glance up. A man in his early 50s, dressed in a crisp polo shirt with an HOA logo embroidered on the chest, was glaring at him. Beside him stood a woman with the same logo stitched onto her blouse, her arms crossed tightly. "Can I help you?" Sam asked, setting his tools aside and brushing off his hands. The man introduced himself as Mark Henderson, president of the Lakeview Heights Homeowners Association. The woman, Linda Carter, was the HOA's compliance officer. Without waiting for an invitation, Mark launched into a formal reprimand. "You can't continue this construction," he stated firmly, pointing at the dock. Any changes to waterfront structures must be approved by our Architectural Review Committee. You're in direct violation of HOA regulations." Sam raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My property isn't part of Lakeview Heights or your HOA. I checked all the documents before I bought it." Linda scoffed, her tone dripping with condescension. "All lakefront properties in this area fall under our jurisdiction. It's part of the community bylaws." Sam stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, my land predates your subdivision. I have the deed and surveys to prove it. Would you like to see them?" Mark's face hardened, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. "We've had complaints from the community about this construction. You need to stop immediately, or we'll have to escalate this matter." It wasn't the warning that unsettled Sam. It was the way Mark and Linda carried themselves, as if they already owned the land beneath his feet. "This is private property," Sam replied, "and you're trespassing. I'll have to ask you to leave." Linda's lips curled into a sneer. "We'll see about that," she muttered as they turned and walked away, but not before Mark shot Sam a final pointed glare. Sam stood by the shore for a moment, staring at their retreating figures. He hadn't anticipated that his project would draw this kind of attention. Shaking his head, he went back to work, trying to brush off the encounter as an overreach by nosy neighbors. But it didn't end there. Days later, Sam returned from a trip to town to find bright orange stop work notices plastered across the posts of his half-built dock. Security cameras he'd installed earlier showed Mark and Linda trespassing on his property at dawn, slapping up the notices as though they had every right to do so. Sam felt a surge of frustration. He had been meticulous in ensuring his construction complied with county regulations, yet here were strangers, acting as if they had authority over him, dictating what he could and couldn't do on his own land. When a certified letter from the HOA arrived the next day, demanding that Sam halt construction and pay a $5,000 fine for non-compliance, his frustration turned to resolve. Clearly, this was not going to be resolved with a polite conversation. Sam contacted his attorney, Jess Weiss, for advice. Reviewing the letter, Jess was unequivocal. "They have no legal grounds. Their bylaws only apply to properties within the HOA's boundaries, and you're not part of it. We'll send them a cease and desist letter. If they keep pushing, we'll escalate." Despite Jess's reassurances, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA wasn't done. The way Mark had stared at him, the smugness in Linda's tone. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. The orange notices on Sam's property weren't just an annoyance. They were a declaration of war. As he tore the paper from the dock's beams, he felt an unwelcome sense of violation. The idea that someone had trespassed on his land, disregarding his rights, was infuriating. Sam's patience, already wearing thin, was tested further the following morning when a second certified letter arrived. This one from the HOA's legal counsel accused him of violating community standards, claiming his property was subject to their jurisdiction. They demanded he submit plans for the dock to their Architectural Review Committee and pay $5,000 in fines or face legal action. Sam's attorney, Jess Weiss, reviewed the letter, her brow furrowing with every sentence. "This is nonsense," she said. "They're attempting to enforce rules on land they have no control over. We'll respond formally, but be prepared. HOAs like this don't back down easily." The formal cease and desist letter Jess sent to the HOA outlined the facts. Sam's property was not within Lakeview Heights, their bylaws did not apply to him, and their actions constituted harassment. She included copies of Sam's deed, property survey, and county permits. It was a clear and direct response, but the HOA had no intention of conceding. 2 days later, Sam's security cameras caught a troubling scene. Mark Henderson and Linda Carter, this time accompanied by 2 contractors, entered Sam's property. While Linda stood by, clipboard in hand, Mark directed the workers to begin dismantling the partially constructed dock. They were midway through removing a section of the framework when Sam, alerted by his phone, arrived on the scene. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Sam shouted as he approached, his phone recording the confrontation. Mark turned, his face calm but defiant. "Removing an unapproved structure," he replied. "This dock violates HOA standards, and we have every right to enforce compliance." "You're trespassing on private property," Sam said, his voice low and controlled despite his anger. "This is illegal." Linda smirked. "Go ahead, call the police," she said. "We have legal authority here." Sam didn't hesitate. He dialed 911, and within minutes, Officer Sean Harper arrived with 2 deputies. After reviewing Sam's documents and the security footage, the officers ordered Mark, Linda, and the contractors to leave immediately. The contractors, visibly uncomfortable, apologized to Sam, explaining they hadn't realized they were trespassing. "This is your final warning," Officer Harper told Mark and Linda. "If you or anyone from the HOA enters this property again without permission, you will be arrested for criminal trespass." Linda's confident demeanor cracked, but Mark's defiance remained. "This isn't over," he muttered as they left. Sam thought the ordeal might finally be behind him, but he was wrong. The HOA escalated their tactics, filing an injunction to halt construction and demanding a court order to enforce their perceived authority. Sam's attorney countered with a lawsuit of their own, citing criminal trespass, vandalism, and harassment. As preparations for the court date began, Jess uncovered damning evidence during the discovery process. Internal emails from the HOA revealed that Mark and Linda were fully aware that Sam's property was not under their jurisdiction. In fact, they had deliberately chosen to pursue him, believing they could intimidate him into compliance. The discovery only fueled Sam's determination. The legal battle became more than just a fight for his dock. It was now a matter of principle. Each day, as he watched his half-finished project sit idle, he thought about the sheer audacity of the HOA. He remembered the smugness in Linda's tone, the entitlement in Mark's glare, and the disruption they had brought to his peaceful life. Adding to the tension, neighbors from Lakeview Heights began stopping by his property. Some came to voice their support, frustrated with the HOA's overreach. Others, however, repeated the HOA's claims, questioning why Sam couldn't simply follow the rules. The pressure was palpable, but Sam stood firm. One evening, as he reviewed court documents with Jess, she said, "You realize this isn't just about your dock anymore. If we win, this sets a precedent. It sends a message to every overreaching HOA that homeowners aren't powerless." Sam nodded. "Good," he replied, "because people like Mark and Linda need to learn. They don't own everything they can see." The stage was set for a showdown. Sam's patience had run out, and the HOA, blinded by their arrogance, had no idea the storm they had unleashed. The courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation as the two sides prepared to face off. On one side sat Sam, calm but resolute, flanked by his attorney Jess Weiss. On the other sat Mark Henderson and Linda Carter, their faces set in a blend of confidence and irritation, accompanied by their HOA's legal counsel. For Sam, this day was about more than just defending his dock. It was a battle to reclaim his peace and establish that his rights were non-negotiable. As the judge entered, the room fell silent. The HOA's counsel was first to present their case. They argued that their bylaws extended authority over all adjacent lakefront properties, claiming that Sam's construction violated community standards. They pointed to clauses in their documents that, in their view, gave them the right to enforce compliance. Jess was ready. When her turn came, she methodically dismantled their arguments. She presented the original deed to Sam's property, dated decades before Lakeview Heights was even established. She introduced the property survey, showing its clear exclusion from HOA boundaries. To drive the point home, she submitted emails uncovered during discovery, where Mark and Linda admitted knowing they had no jurisdiction, but decided to act regardless. The judge's expression grew sterner as he reviewed the evidence. At one point, he paused to address the HOA's attorney directly. "Are you seriously suggesting that your bylaws allow you to control land you do not own or have any legal claim to? That's not how property law works." The HOA's argument began to crumble under scrutiny, but Jess wasn't done. She called Officer Harper to testify about the trespassing incidents and introduced video footage showing Mark and Linda directing contractors to dismantle Sam's dock. The footage spoke louder than any argument, showing the blatant disregard for Sam's rights. Mark and Linda shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the judge turned his attention to their actions. "This isn't just overreach," he said sternly. "This is harassment. You knowingly targeted this man's property, attempting to enforce rules that have no legal basis. Your behavior has been reckless and, frankly, egregious." When Jess presented Sam's counterclaims, including damages for trespass, vandalism, and emotional distress, the judge nodded gravely. "The plaintiff has provided overwhelming evidence," he said. "The defendant's actions were not only unauthorized, but malicious. This court cannot and will not tolerate such abuse of perceived authority. After a brief recess, the judge delivered his verdict. The injunction against Sam was dismissed, and the HOA was ordered to cease all actions against him. Sam was awarded $40,000 in damages for the cost of repairs and delays, $25,000 for emotional distress, and $10,000 for legal fees. Additionally, a permanent injunction was placed on the HOA, barring them from any further interference with Sam's property. Mark and Linda's smug demeanor had vanished entirely by the end of the proceedings. As the court adjourned, Sam caught a final glance at them, disheveled, humiliated, and clearly unprepared for the consequences of their actions. Walking out of the courthouse, Jess turned to Sam with a small smile. "You didn't just win for yourself today," she said. "You sent a message." Sam nodded, exhaling deeply. For the first time in months, he felt the weight begin to lift. The battle had been hard fought, but the victory was his. The courtroom victory set a chain of events in motion that reshaped the dynamics around Lakeview Heights. For Sam, the verdict was a vindication of his rights and a well-earned reprieve from months of harassment. For the HOA, it was a wake-up call that reverberated far beyond their community. Sam's first step after the trial was to repair the damage to his dock. With his newly won compensation, he hired a reliable local contractor, one not connected to the HOA, to finish the construction. Within weeks, the dock and boathouse stood completed, a testament to Sam's resilience. The dock became more than just a functional structure. It was a symbol of his refusal to yield to unjust authority. Neighbors from surrounding areas began referring to it as Freedom Dock. Meanwhile, the fallout within the HOA was immediate and severe. News of the trial spread quickly through Lakeview Heights, leaving many residents outraged. Homeowners were shocked to learn that their dues had been used to fund frivolous legal battles, ultimately resulting in hefty financial losses. An emergency meeting of the HOA was called, where Mark Henderson and Linda Carter faced a furious crowd. "You lied to us," one resident accused. "You knew you didn't have jurisdiction, but you dragged us into this mess anyway." Others demanded accountability, questioning why their money had been wasted on a campaign of harassment that had no legal standing. By the end of the meeting, both Mark and Linda resigned under intense pressure. Several other board members who had supported their overreach also stepped down in disgrace. A new interim board was elected, led by community members who promised transparency and a commitment to respecting boundaries. The interim board wasted no time rewriting the HOA's bylaws to clearly define its jurisdiction and limit the scope of its authority. They also instituted mandatory training sessions for board members on property law and homeowners' rights, ensuring that future conflicts would be handled responsibly. For Sam, the changes in Lakeview Heights were a step in the right direction, but his focus was on the future. He hosted a neighborhood gathering to celebrate the completion of his dock, inviting not just his friends, but also residents from Lakeview Heights who had supported him during the ordeal. The event was lively, with families fishing off the dock, children playing by the shore, and conversations flowing freely. Among the attendees was the new HOA president, a retired lawyer named Diane Walters. Diane approached Sam with an olive branch. "I want to personally apologize for what you went through," she said. "Our community has a lot of healing to do, but I hope we can start by being better neighbors." Sam accepted the apology, appreciating the gesture. While he remained wary of the HOA, he could see genuine efforts being made to mend fences and rebuild trust. As for Mark and Linda, their reputations were in tatters. Mark moved out of Lakeview Heights within months, reportedly unable to face the backlash from his former neighbors. Linda's name became synonymous with overreach, her ambitions to climb the HOA ladder elsewhere, thwarted by the notoriety of the case. The trial had lasting consequences far beyond Lakeview Heights. Other communities in the region took notice, reevaluating their own HOA practices and updating policies to prevent similar abuses of power. Local property rights advocates began using Sam's case as a teaching tool, holding workshops to educate homeowners about their rights. For Sam, the victory wasn't just about winning a legal battle, it was about ensuring that no one else would have to face what he did. Sitting on his dock one quiet evening, watching the sunset over the lake, he felt a deep sense of peace. The fight had been worth it, not just for himself, but for everyone who valued their freedom to live without unjust interference. Months had passed since the court decision, and life at the lake had returned to the peace Sam Morton had originally envisioned. Sitting on his dock one breezy evening, he watched the golden hues of the setting sun reflect off the water, the serenity a stark contrast to the chaos he had endured. The ordeal had been taxing, but it had also been transformative. For him, for his neighbors, and for the entire Lakeview Heights community. Sam's fight against overreach became a rallying cry for others facing similar injustices. His story was picked up by local news outlets and eventually gained traction in homeowner forums and property rights advocacy groups. Sam was invited to speak at community meetings and legal workshops, where he shared the importance of knowing your rights and standing firm against intimidation. The impact of his case extended far beyond Lakeview Heights. Several nearby HOAs revisited their bylaws, tightening definitions of their authority and implementing better governance practices. State legislators even began discussing new regulations to ensure that homeowners associations could not abuse their power or claim authority over properties outside their jurisdiction. Back in Lakeview Heights, Sam's dock, affectionately dubbed Freedom Dock by neighbors, became a symbol of resilience and empowerment. Each spring, he hosted an annual gathering for the community, where families shared stories, fished off the dock, and celebrated the progress they had made together. What had once been a point of division was now a cornerstone of unity. Even the new HOA board embraced the lessons from Sam's victory. Diane Walters, the new president, worked tirelessly to rebuild trust among the residents, instituting open forums and emphasizing collaboration. The neighborhood gradually shifted from one ruled by rigid control to a community built on respect and cooperation. For Sam, the journey had been about more than just defending his dock. It was about standing up for his beliefs, protecting his home, and reminding everyone that even in the face of overwhelming opposition, fairness and justice could prevail. Looking out over the calm waters of Lake Clarkville, Sam knew that the fight had been worth it, not just for himself, but for everyone who would benefit from the change it inspired. As the stars began to dot the sky, Sam smiled to himself. He had built more than just a dock. He had built a legacy of resilience and inspiration that would ripple far beyond the lake.